The pirates took one human hostage, their entire clan was gone by morning. Captain Voss Kraal had built his reputation on a simple rule: take the cargo, take a hostage if the crew resisted, and never, under any circumstances, waste time you didn't need to spend on a job that size. The freighter Wandering Verse had been an easy mark, unshielded, undergunned, running a slow trade route through the Kessik Reach with a crew list that showed 6 humans and nothing that looked like trouble. Voss's boarding team hit the airlock at 0200 ship time, subdued the crew with stun charges before any of them cleared their bunks, and were back aboard the holophone within 11 minutes with the ship's cargo manifest and one very quiet, very still human woman zip-tied at the wrists. "That went easier than it should have," said Ren, Voss's second, watching the medics run a scanner over the hostage's vitals. No distress beacon fired. No weapons drawn. Crew barely put up a fight. "They knew fighting back would get somebody killed," Voss said, not particularly interested in the observation. He was already 3 steps toward the bridge, already thinking about the ransom call he'd place once they cleared the reach. "Smart crew. Doesn't mean much for us either way. Lock her in the hold, keep her fed, don't touch her. Ransom hostages are worth double if they come back undamaged." Ren glanced back at the woman once more before following him. She hadn't said a word since they'd taken her. She hadn't screamed, hadn't pleaded, hadn't done any of the things Ren had come to expect from frightened captives in 14 years of this work. She had simply watched the boarding team with an expression Ren would later struggle to describe to anyone who asked, an expression that looked less like fear and more like a person quietly doing arithmetic. Her name, according to the freighter's crew manifest, was Elena Voss, no relation to the captain, a coincidence nobody on the holophone thought twice about, listed as a systems technician, 3rd class. It was, Ren would later learn, one of the more thorough lies his clan had ever been handed without realizing it. Kraal's clan had operated the Kessik Reach for 11 years, a stretch of trade lanes wide and lawless enough that no single system authority claimed responsibility for policing it, which suited pirates and smugglers of a dozen species just fine. Voss had built his outfit slowly, methodically, the way a man builds something he intends to keep for a long time: 24 crew, 3 ships, a hidden base carved into the hollow core of a nickel-iron asteroid that had taken 4 years and most of his early profits to convert. He was not reckless. He was not cruel beyond what the job required. He simply took what moved through his territory, ransomed what could be ransomed, and had never, in 11 years, lost a ship to anything more dangerous than an unlucky asteroid field. It was that record, more than any particular arrogance, that made him slow to recognize what was actually happening to him. What Voss did not know, and would not learn until it was far too late to matter, was that the Wandering Verse had not run its trade route by accident. For pirate outfits, including his own, had been quietly probing that lane for the better part of 6 months, and every one of them had been logged, tracked, and cross-referenced by a program that existed specifically to identify exactly this pattern of behavior before it escalated into something worse. The freighter's real cargo had been nothing at all. Its real cargo had been an invitation, dressed carefully enough that no pirate crew boarding it would think twice before taking the bait sitting quietly in its crew quarters. The ransom call went out within the hour, routed through 3 relay points to the human trade consortium that had chartered the Wandering Verse's route. Voss kept his demands reasonable by pirate standards, enough to be worth the risk, not so much it would draw a military response he couldn't outrun. He gave them 18 hours to respond. They did not use all 18 hours. 4 hours in, the holophone's sensor officer, a wiry thrall named Doss, called Voss to the bridge with a tightness in his voice that Voss had learned, over many years, to take seriously. "Captain. We're picking up an unregistered contact on our tail. Small profile, no transponder, matching our speed exactly at 40,000 kilometers. Human military? No signature match to anything in the consortium's registered fleet. It's not broadcasting anything at all, actually. I only found it because it's occulting a star cluster it shouldn't be occulting." Doss frowned at his readout. "Captain, it's been there since we left the Reach. It's been following us the whole time and I only just noticed." Voss felt the first thin thread of unease work its way into his chest, though he would not have called it that at the time. Evasive pattern. Lose it. They did not lose it. For the next 2 hours, the holophone cut through 3 separate asteroid fields, dropped and restarted its drive signature twice to fake a trans-like jump, and ran silent along a debris trail specifically chosen because Voss knew from long experience that it scrambled most passive sensor arrays into uselessness. The unregistered contact stayed exactly 40,000 kilometers behind them the entire time, adjusting for every maneuver with a smoothness that suggested it wasn't struggling to track them at all. It was simply choosing to stay at that distance, the way a predator paces a wounded animal it knows doesn't need chasing at. Captain. Elena's voice came quietly from the hold's intercom, the first words she'd spoken since capture, relayed up to the bridge by a guard who hadn't expected her to talk at all. You should let me go now. It would be easier for everyone. Voss walked down to the hold himself, more out of irritation than concern. She sat exactly where they'd left her, wrists still bound, watching him with that same still, calculating expression. You're in a stolen freighter's hold with a bounty on your head, and you're telling me what would be easier for me? I'm telling you what would be easier for your crew, she said. There's a difference, and you should probably start caring about it in the next few hours. Voss laughed, short and humorless. You think that ship back there is coming for you? It's probably just Consortium Recon, trying to work out where we're headed so they can lowball the ransom. It's not Consortium Recon. Elena's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It's my brother. And he doesn't negotiate ransoms. He just makes sure the people who took something back never do it again. Voss studied her for a long moment, looking for the tell of a bluff, the small twitch of desperation he'd seen in 100 hostages trying to talk their way out of a bad situation. He didn't find it. What he found instead was the particular calm of someone who genuinely believed, without a shred of doubt, that the next several hours were already decided and simply hadn't happened yet. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit, and he left the hold without answering her, which he would later understand was itself an answer. By the 6th hour, 3 more unregistered contacts had appeared, spread wide around the holophong in a loose net that widened and tightened with a patience that had nothing to do with military doctrine Voss recognized from any species he'd studied. Doss reported them one at a time, his voice climbing steadily higher with each addition, until by the 4th contact he wasn't reporting numbers anymore so much as pleading. Captain, I don't think this is a rescue attempt. A rescue attempt tries to extract the hostage quietly or trades for her. This is something else. They're not hailing us. They're not demanding anything. They're just closing. At the 9th hour, the holophong's short-range communications array lit up with an incoming transmission that Doss almost didn't route to the bridge, because the request codes attached to it didn't match anything in the consortium's registry, or any registry at all that he could identify. Voss took it anyway, more from a gambler's curiosity than good judgment. The voice on the other end was male, unhurried, and did not bother with an introduction. Captain Kraal. I'm going to give you one opportunity to do this the easy way. Put my sister in an escape pod, launch it toward the 3rd contact on your scope, and take your ship and crew and leave this system. Nobody else needs to get hurt tonight. And if I don't, then I'm going to take my sister back anyway, and everyone aboard your ship who isn't her is going to have a considerably worse night than the one they're currently expecting. The voice didn't rise, didn't threaten in any way Voss's instincts recognized as posturing. It simply stated the outcome the way a man reads a weather report. You have 4 minutes, Captain. I'd use them. Voss cut the channel and turned to Ren, who had gone very quiet at the console beside him. 4 minutes. That's not a rescue timeline. Nobody boards a hostile ship in 4 minutes. Captain, Ren said slowly, staring at his own readout, I don't think he's planning to board us in the way you're thinking. The first sign that something had gone deeply wrong came 90 seconds later, when every weapons system on the holophong's forward battery went dark simultaneously, not damaged, not destroyed, simply and completely unresponsive, as if the ship itself had quietly decided it no longer had teeth. Doss's sensor board followed 30 seconds after that, resolving into static so clean and total it looked less like interference and more like something reaching in and gently switching the array off. By the 3-minute mark, the holophong's engines had stopped answering helm control entirely, and Voss found himself standing on the bridge of a ship that was, for all practical purposes, no longer a ship at all, just a hull drifting quietly through space with a crew that had nothing left to fight with and nowhere left to run. For minutes, Voss said aloud, mostly to himself, watching the countdown he hadn't realized he'd started keeping in his head. At the 4-minute mark exactly, every airlock on the holophong cycled open at once. There was no boarding fight, because there was nothing left to fight with, and no explosive breach, because none was needed. The figures that moved through the ship's corridors did so with the unhurried efficiency of people executing a plan they had rehearsed many times before, disabling crew members with quick, precise, non-lethal strikes and moving on without a wasted motion, and within 6 minutes of the airlock's opening, the entire crew of the holophong, Voss included, had been secured without a single shot fired by either side. Elena's brother found her in the hold exactly where she'd been left, wrists still bound, watching the doorway with an expression that had finally, after 9 hours, allowed itself to relax into something like relief. He cut the ties himself and helped her to her feet without a word, and it was only after she was steady that he turned to look at Voss, who sat zip-tied against the hold's far wall with the particular stunned silence of a man watching his entire understanding of the last 9 hours rearrange itself into something much worse. "You're wondering how," the brother said. "It wasn't a question. Short version, my sister isn't a systems technician. She's part of a program most people in this quadrant don't know exists yet, on a ship that was never actually running the trade route it looked like it was running. You didn't take a hostage tonight, Captain. You took bait off a ship that was specifically positioned along that lane because clans like yours had been targeting it for months, and every single one of you walked directly into a trap that's been 6 weeks in the building." He knelt slightly to bring himself level with Voss's eyes. "The consortium isn't going to pay your ransom, because there was never going to be a ransom paid. There was only ever going to be this." By dawn, ship relative, the Holofong had been stripped of its weapons, its crew transferred under guard to a human-operated detention transport, and its clan's operating base, a converted asteroid habitat 3 systems away that Voss had spent 11 years believing was untraceable, had been quietly located and secured by a second team that had been moving on it since the moment the ransom call first went out. That second team had not fired a shot either. They hadn't needed to. Kraal's base ran on a skeleton crew of 6 during standard rotation, none of whom had any warning that the flagship was already compromised, and by the time the base's own sensors detected the incoming vessels, every internal system that mattered had already been quietly locked down by a small technical team that had spent the last 3 weeks embedded on the station under cover identities as contracted maintenance workers, waiting for exactly this signal. By the time local authorities were formally notified, there was nothing left of Kraal's clan to notify anyone about. No fleet. No base. No crew left free to warn the next pirate outfit what had actually happened out past the Kessik Reach that night. The maintenance crew, it turned out later, had been embedded on the station for far longer than 3 weeks in some cases, patient enough to fix the actual life support faults they were nominally hired to fix, patient enough to be trusted with wider and wider access, and patient enough to never once give away that they were counting the days until a ransom call from a stolen freighter told them it was finally time. Elena sat in the transport's small galley several hours later, finally eating a proper meal for the first time in 9 hours, while her brother reviewed the operation's final report on a datapad across from her. "You could have gotten yourself killed sitting in that hold for 9 hours, he said, not looking up. "You could have moved faster," she said, unbothered, "but you wanted the whole clan, not just the ship, so I sat there and let you build your case." She took another bite. "Worked out fine." He did look up then, something between exasperation and genuine pride crossing his face. "Next time, warn me before you volunteer for bait duty." "Next time," Elena said, "don't leave me tied up for 9 hours." She smiled slightly, the first real smile since the boarding, and looked out the small viewport at the drifting, silent hulk of the Holofong receding behind them. "Word's going to get around the Reach fast. That's the part that actually matters. Every clan operating out here is about to learn the same lesson Kraal did, and they're going to learn it a lot cheaper than he did, because they'll hear the story instead of living it." Her brother closed the report and set the pad aside. "That's the idea," he said quietly. "We didn't build this program to rescue one hostage at a time. We built it so nobody bothers taking one in the first place." He glanced toward the viewport one last time before the freighter's hull disappeared into the dark behind them. "Kraal had 11 years and a reputation. It took us 9 hours to make sure neither of those meant anything anymore. That's the whole message, and by morning, every pirate clan within 3 sectors is going to have heard it whether they wanted to or not." 3 weeks later, a smaller outfit operating 2 systems over quietly abandoned a half-finished plan to raid a human supply convoy, not because they'd been warned directly, but because word had traveled the way word always does in lawless space, mouth to mouth, exaggerated a little more with every retelling, until the story of Kraal's clan had become less a cautionary tale and more a kind of quiet law unto itself. Nobody knew exactly how many operations like Elena's were running through the Reach. That uncertainty, more than any single rescue, was what actually kept the lane quiet in the months that followed. Elena finished her meal, set the tray aside, and watched the stars slide past the viewport in silence, thinking, not for the first time, that the clans out here had built their entire way of life on the assumption that nobody was watching closely enough to stop them, and that assumption, more than any weapon her brother's team carried, had turned out to be the only thing they'd actually needed to break.